This is a brief tutorial of the game Ticket to Ride Europe as played on Board Game Arena. Ticket to Ride Europe is a route building game, very similar to the normal Ticket to Ride, but there are a few key differences. I'm going to explain the basic rules of Ticket to Ride and then talk about some of the differences later in this tutorial. I'll timestamp that in the description if you want to skip ahead if you already know how to play Ticket to Ride. Ticket to Ride is, again, a route building game where you're building trains, in this case across various cities in Europe, in order to get points by laying down the trains, or also get points by filling in destinations, connecting two cities together, getting you points. Everyone starts with 45 trains, and the game goes and continues until somebody's used all but 2 or less of their trains, at which point everybody gets one final turn, and then the game is tallied up by points. You'll get points over the course of the game based on laying the tracks. Here are some of the points that you get. If you lay one train down, it's 1 point. If you lay 2 down, it's 2. It's like here's a 2 and then a 4 and a 3. These points coincide with the distance of these specific links between cities. You get points for any of the destination tickets that you connect. So if I connect, for instance, in this case, Kiev and Petrograd, these two cities here, I would get 6 points. But if at the end of the game I do not connect those, I lose the 6 points instead. Here from Berlin to Rome is 9 points, and so on and so forth. This one that you see is blue because it's a fairly long one, all the way from Moscow down to Palermo. And that's worth 20 points. Again, if I don't get that by the end of the game, I lose that 20 points. And there's also an extra 10 points you get for having the longest route when you track your longest route, and BGA will nicely calculate that all for you. And there also is some points if you don't use your stations. We'll talk about what that means in a bit. That's the main way to get points throughout the game and at the end of the game. The game kind of goes until, again, somebody reaches that minimum number of trains. And on your turn, you have an option of doing 3 different things. You can draw cards, you can play down trains, or you can draw new destination cards. So at the very beginning, you're going to have 4 destination cards, and you have to keep at least 2. So I kept these 2, and BJ will highlight those cities that you need to connect there. I tried to overlap them a bit, like I got all 3 of these together so I can just kind of focus on getting this area and then connecting it down to here. Hopefully avoiding a lot of maybe some traffic jams in this Western European part. Anyway, I have these 2. I could have picked more than that, but I just picked the 2. And I can always get more, but again, any that I pick and don't choose or don't complete at the end of the game will be minus points. So everybody will choose their tickets. And then on your turn, you have 3 options. You can draw cards from the stack, you can lay trains using those cards, or you can take new destinations, like I mentioned. All right, so drawing, you start out with 4 cards here, and you can see the cards come in various colors. And some cards, these locomotives here, are basically wilds. When you draw cards, you can draw up to 2 cards, and you can either draw face-up cards here, which as soon as you draw it will be refilled from the pile here, or you can draw from the top of the deck. And you can see there are some locomotives showing up here, these wilds. If you draw that from the face-up, you only get 1. So you couldn't take both of these wild cards there. However, if you take from the face-down deck and it happens to be a wild, you can still draw another one because that's not public information. You just got lucky there. And if you want, you can draw 1 from the face-up cards and 1 from the deck. Any combination of up to 2 cards unless you take a face-up locomotive and then it's just 1. So you can see people will take cards and continue to build. There's no hand limit. You can have as many cards in your hand as you'd like. See, I took from the top there a red card and a green card. I am trying to get some of these connections here, so some oranges and reds, and there aren't any oranges or reds there, so I'm going to pull from the deck, and I did get a red, so that's good, and I'll hopefully eventually get some more cards that I'm looking for. That's the first thing you can do, drawing cards. The second thing you do is laying down track. So you can see here there are different destination or routes here, and some of them have colors on them, like this yellow here, and some of them are gray. If there is a color like yellow or blue or red or orange, you have to use that many of that card. So in order to go from here to here, I need to pay 2 orange train cards, or a combination of wilds as well. To go from Smolensk to Kiev, I need to pay 3 red. When it is a gray one, you can pay whatever color you want. It just has to be the same color. So this 4 gray here, it can be 4 of any color, but it has to be all 4 of the same color. And again, you can mix in wilds as you need. Some routes have double spots there. So here you can, from Berlin to Warsaw, you can either play 4 purple or 4 yellow. Important to note though, if you play the 4 purple, then someone else can play the 4 yellow and go on that route as well, if it's a 4 or 5 player game. If it's a 2 or 3 player game, only one person can take these double routes. And here you can even see some double gray routes. And those, again, they would have to be all the same color, but 2 people could take that route if it's a 4 or 5 player game. As soon as you lay down your trains for that route, you get the points, and they show up here in your point total there, and your number of trains goes down. That's the second thing you can do. The third thing you can do is draw more destination cards. If you decide to do that, and you don't have to have these filled if you do it, but it's probably advised to fill the ones you have before getting more. Again, you don't want to take that negative hit at the end of the game. When you take new destination cards, you pull 3, and you have to keep at least 1. You can keep more than 1 if it works out, but usually you'll probably just keep 1. Typically, this is later in the game where you have a lot of routes built, and so you're looking at those 3 destination cards, looking, well, what's the easiest destination that I can build? Sometimes you could pick one and you already have it built, and you just pick it and complete it, and that's great. That can be lucky, but typically you're going to pick 3 and you're like, ooh, I can almost make that one. If I just make 1 or 2 more routes here, I can finish and complete that. That is getting all 3, or that is getting new destination cards. That's the third thing that you can do. The turns go round and round doing one of those 3 things until the end of the game is triggered and points are totaled up, and whoever has the most points wins the game. Those are the basic rules for Ticket to Ride. So let's talk about what's new in Ticket to Ride Europe. Well, you can see, obviously we're in a new map, so that changes things a bit, but you can see some different symbols around here. So let's first talk about this symbol right here. It's a locomotive symbol. You can see that some of the gray ones here have that locomotive symbol on 1 or more of the paths here. What that means is when you complete this route, you have to use one of those wilds. It's required. So in this case, to get from London to this city that I don't know how to pronounce, you need to use 1 of a color and 1 wild. To get from London to Amsterdam, you have to use 2 wilds. From Essen to Copenhagen, you have to use 3 cards, but 1 of them has to be one of the wilds. Adds a little bit of trickiness to it. The others are these tunnels. So you can see that these trains look a little bit different. These tracks here, the ones with the nubs on them. And these are a bit of a push your luck when you want to fill one of these. So what happens is, let's say I want to go from Paris to Zurich. I get 3 cards of the same color. It doesn't matter what color. Let's say I have 3 purples. Then I say I want to do that one. Then what happens is you draw the top 3 cards of the deck face up. And if I chose purple, any purples or any wilds that show up in those top 3 mean I have to pay an extra purple or wild to complete that tunnel. So if I have those 3 purples, I pull it up and it's a red, an orange, and a purple, that means I have to pay an extra purple from my hand to complete that tunnel. If it shows up with a purple, a wild, and a red, that means I have to have 2 extra purples. And again, I can always replace them with wilds. In these tunnels, you have to use the color that it happened, or that it shows. Like from Munich to Zurich, I would have to use yellows, and I would pay at least 2, but according to, depending on what shows up in those top 3 cards, I might have to pay more than 2 yellow. The one weird exception is if you paid, like if I paid from Paris to Zurich with all wilds, with all locomotives, then I would only have to pay if locomotives showed up. But then I would have to pay with more wild cards. But it wouldn't be like any color that shows up would count extra there. So those are the tunnels. The final main new piece of your Ticket to Ride Europe are what are called stations. And these stations are ways that you can use other people's routes to get from one place to another to fulfill your tickets. So if I have a route and I just get completely blocked off, let's say I need to go from Stockholm to Moscow, and this spot has someone else took, and all the other spot, and this spot's taken. Just there's no other spots. There's no way to do it. I have to get this route, and someone else took it. Well, I could take one of my stations and place it on either the Petrograd or Moscow, and I can use whatever route was laid there. I can use the trains for that route. So if I'm yellow and the reds were there and I put my station on Moscow, then I can go, and that will count towards that destination ticket if I need to connect there. Only one person's station can be on a city at a time, and the way to put a station on is by paying a card for your first station, any card, 2 matching for your second station, and then 3 matching if you need to put a third one down. So you can use just a green or red or any single card, but then if you want to put your second station down, and you can only put up to 3, then you have to use matching cards to pay for those other stations. The other important thing to note is that any station that you don't use is worth 4 points at the end of the game. This game that I played here, nobody used any of their stations, and everybody got 12 points at the end of the game, and it was a pretty tight game within 1 point, and so it was important that we didn't use those. So it's not something that you're going to want to use willy-nilly, but if it's the difference between getting that 20-point destination ticket or not, you definitely want to use it and use that station to get to that destination. So one difference too in the destination card, speaking of, noted that this blue one and the red ones here. The blue ones are starting destination cards that everybody is going to get at least one of those. There are a total of 6 of them, these blue long destinations. So everybody gets one of those, and then 3 of the red as their initial 4. So those are the only real long ones that you'll see. The rest are fairly short, between 5 and 10, maybe 11 points, whereas this long one you could see was 20 points. Those are the main differences. these locomotive routes, the tunnels, stations that you can use, and the slightly different destination cards. We talked about the longest route. That's the same way that it works in the regular Ticket to Ride. And at the end of the game, whoever has the most points wins. So as you can see, as we go through that, a lot of the beginning of a game is just drawing a lot of cards, because there is no and there's no hand limit, and so it's good to just kind of build it up so you can plan out what you do. But eventually somebody starts playing and taking routes, and you may want to make sure that you are getting the routes that you need and somebody isn't cutting you off. So you can see somebody just placed a route over there. And this person then took this really small route. Sometimes those little ones are really important to get if otherwise you have to go around in order to claim them. I did want to show one thing that happened early. So this person tried to get a tunnel, and they drew 3 locomotives on their top card. That means they needed 3 extra to get that tunnel. They weren't able to do it, so they just had to discard their cards and not get the tunnel, and their turn ends. So yeah, if you try to get a tunnel and you fail because of that, your turn ends. You don't get to try again or draw cards or anything like that. So those are bit risk. You always want to have at least 1 or 2 extra cards available when you do those tunnels, because they can be pretty important and pretty important loss if you don't get them when you try. That is Ticket to Ride Europe. Hope this was helpful.